poor. He then goes on and closes, says, "I'm glad you wrote me, because I think there are a lot of people like you who need straightening out on this subject. Sincerely, Harry Truman." I want to thank you all here in Independence for giving us the opportunity to tell the people of this country what we're really asking for. Now, of course, most people understand already. 7 in 10 Americans, doctors in the AMA, workers in the AFL-CIO, seniors in the AARP, farmers, Fortune 500 companies, and 700,000 small businesses. They understand, and they're speaking out on our behalf. But others are battling us with all the special interest money and all the political power they can muster. So we're here in the spirit of Harry Truman to take on the obstructionists, the gridlockers, and the high-powered defenders of the status quo. Mr. President, I wanted to share something with you today. I had good political upbringing. My late father was a Missouri Congressman, A.S.J. Carnahan, a devoted follower and supporter of Harry Truman's. He took me to a political rally, November of 1948. Saturday night before the election, Kiel Auditorium, St. Louis, an overflow crowd of over 15,000 people. That was the end of Harry's give 'em hell whistle-stop race for president. And that night, there was standing room only. The only way I could even be inside the hall was for my dad to take me on stage, and we stood behind the president as he spoke. Now, I can't remember all that he said in that speech, but I do remember his chipper confidence in that pessimistic political atmosphere. I do remember his fierce, often daring commitment to do what he thought was right. And we all remember, what we all remember about that is that he prevailed in that election. With the help of you people here and the people of this country, we're going to do this year what Harry Truman set out to do. And I can think of no one better suited to do it than President Bill Clinton. His commitment to the people of this country is enduring and strong, and if it's shown nowhere else, it's shown in his taking on this fight for health care reform. President Clinton is leading this fight for health care reform with a spirit that would make Harry Truman proud. And in the end, despite what the pundits may say, we together will prevail. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, it's my high privilege to present to you the President of the United States.
Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Carnahan. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and Tipper and Hillary, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. And let me especially thank those two fine women, mother and daughter, that stood up here and spoke for the nearly 40 million Americans who deserve health care. I have to tell you, a lot of things have been said here today, and maybe everything that needs to be said has been said, but I would like to offer one mildly dissenting view. I believe that most of the people here who disagree with me today about national health reform do admire Harry Truman. They probably think he ought to be on Mount Rushmore, and it must be surprising to them to know that they had the same arguments that are being made against us made against him 50 years ago. That is always the case when you try to change things, and why it's so important to use the presidency to fight to help the ordinary American to live a better life. You've already heard it. You've heard it in what the other people have said. Harry Truman had to say, no, this is not socialized medicine. This is private insurance. No, this is not a government takeover. We're preserving the choice in the private medical system. No, we're not going to waste more money. Covering everybody will actually save money. And what did they say? Harry Truman's a radical liberal. He's for socialized medicine. He's for big government. He's going to take this country down. Well, the truth is, Harry Truman had independence Missouri values. He had this old-fashioned notion that we value work and family and faith, and people who work hard and play by the rules ought to help one another when they need it, ought to join together to help themselves and to help their children have a better life. And that is really what is at stake here. All this screaming and yelling, what's really hurting America today is that we're shouting too much and listening too little and speaking in respectful tones too little. Two years ago, on Labor Day, when we all came here to kick off our general election campaign, what a wet day it was. You remember how wet it was? And we stood here in the rain because we believed we were on a mission to restore the American dream. We were tired of the screaming, yelling, anti-government crowd that told us one thing and did another, that exploded the deficit, reduced investment in the American people, drove our economy into the ground. We were tired of seeing our country come apart and be divided by this rhetoric of hatred and division when we need to be coming together to pull together for the 21st century. And we knew that at the end of the Cold War, we had a great test before us. Would we move into the next century with confidence, hope, united so that we can compete and win, and every one of our children can live up to the fullest of their God-given abilities? Or would we give in to the same old dark fears and divisions that have been dredged up over and over and over again in this country's history? My fellow Americans, that is the real truth of what your president, Harry Truman, had to face. At the end of World War II, when he was the victor in the war, 80% of the people thought he was just great. But then a new world had to be created. And the question was, would the president just tell people what they wanted to hear, or would he set about creating that new world? And what did we get? The GI Bill, a way to educate our families, a way to build houses, a way to build the middle class, bringing down the deficit, stabilizing the economy, rebuilding Europe with the Marshall Plan, rebuilding Japan, standing up against Soviet expansionism so we could eventually win the Cold War. That's what he did. And every step along the way, the American people were subject to the most vicious and brutal attacks. Why? Because when people leave one era, when everybody can look at the future through the same set of glasses, and they have to pick up another set of glasses to figure out how to understand things, we are always vulnerable. You think about your own life. Every time you've been asked to change, you may have a mixture of hope and fear. And the real test every time is, are your fears going to overtake you, and are you going to give in? Or are you going to live by your hopes and your courage and charge forward and grow and become better? That is the test for the United States today. This health care fight is far from the first one in which we have been engaged. When I became president, I told the American people I was tired of hearing people say they were conservative and they hated government and they didn't like the deficit and presiding over the biggest deficits in history, and I would do something about it. And we passed against the solid opposition of every member of the other party in the United States Congress an economic program. And what did it do? $255 billion worth of spending cuts. Tax cuts for 15 million working Americans, including 295,000 Missouri families. a tax increase for the wealthiest 1.5% of our people, a reduction in the federal workforce, something the conservatives say they want, a reduction in the federal workforce of 250,000. And what did we produce? 3 years of deficit reduction for the first time since Harry Truman was the President of the United States. And 3.8 million new jobs, more than in the previous 4 years put together by far.